Behind every mission, every movement, and every attempt to create change, there's a human story shaping how it all unfolds. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and this is Reframing Perspectives. This podcast is for those change makers, those purpose-led founders, nonprofit leaders, growth mindset individuals, and purpose-driven entrepreneurs who believe the work that they're doing in the world should actually make people's lives better. Each week, I'm sitting down change makers who are shaping impact in their industries and communities. And together, we're going to explore the moments, the questions, and the perspective shifts that changed how they lead, how they build relationships, and how they create meaningful change in our world. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives, the podcast for change makers who believe relationships are the real infrastructure of impact. Hi, Ehsan. So excited to have you. It's so fun because I've known you for now, 16 years as a friend. And then having to now interview you in this way is like, I actually went back and of course, I've known you, I've seen you through your entire trajectory of your career and what you've done when you first got to DC, your couch surfing to get into those right spots, and then, did everything you did in Homeland Security and what you're doing now. But having to sit there and read it, I was like, oh, wow, I do know someone pretty awesome who's done incredible work. So it's fun to talk to you in this way because, that's not how it typically goes.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I want to start, Ehsan, with something that I think that is really interesting about you specifically and your life, because the way that I think about change makers often, and I think about individuals that are just committed to making a difference, is there's these four arcs that someone may go through, right? So there's the outsider who needed the system to help them. Then there's the insider who builds the system. There's the watching the system actually dismantle and then having to go back and create something without losing hope that just because something dismantled doesn't mean that we can't rebuild. And I think that it's really, really interesting to see that you're someone who has met each one of those arcs, because starting with the fact that, you came here as a refugee and you were someone who needed the system to help support you and your family to settle and to find that stability. Then comes you working in Homeland Security in the Obama administration, TSA PreCheck, doing things, civil rights, hate crimes, like really helping, giving advice to Homeland Security of like what needs to happen, but on things that were also targeting and surveillancing individuals that looked like you. So there's this like parallel of you having to be in a system that's targeting individuals that look like yourself. And then coming to seeing the dismantling of this in the last, few years, and now with Difference Engine, what you're doing. So you've had such an interesting and incredible life in being able to see all those things. What would you say, when you look at that, what is it like to, in your observation, having experienced it from needing it to being on the inside to seeing what does it really mean to create change?
What does it really mean to create change? I don't know. I've never thought of that. I'm just so always doing that. I mean, I feel for me, it's kind of like, what else would I do? Life is short. Why am I here? Am I here to help a company issue their next, I don't know, product? Am I here to, as a lawyer, would I say I'm here to defend a corporation or a private interest? I mean, that is that what I'm going to say at the end of my life that I've done? That seems kind of sad. So for me, it's just like, what's the good have I done? What good have I done before I've left this planet? And so I try to rack up as much of that good as I can, because to me, that what's everything else is kind of pointless.
And I
Not
get
that it's
that. And
truly pointless, but for me, it is.
no, I hear that, and I think obviously it sounds like this is just something that's so deeply embedded in your DNA of who you are is just, but how much of that has been influenced by obviously your own start in your childhood coming here in the US, or like what would you say has been like the caveat that just keeps you continuously finding that, oh wow, there's an accessibility problem here, I want to help with that, there's a resource problem here, I want to help with that. Before you even were part of Homeland Security in college, you started a movement too. Like you've always had something that you've found and you're like, I'm going to activate on this. What drives that for you?
I don't know. I think it's just the way I'm wired. I think I'm just wired that way. I don't think it has as much to do with my personal background. at somebody who, like you, as you mentioned, as somebody who came as a refugee, as a person of color, as a religious minority. I experienced my fair share of that discrimination, but I think I'm just wired that way, like you are, right? Like some people are just kind of wired to look at a problem and it bothers them, right? So I just go, I'm at a movie theater and I'm like, why is the line painted this way? You know, they could do a better job if it was this thing, right? Or if you're at an event of some kind, you're like, they should have checked RSVPs this way and it would have been more efficient. And the more you get wired like that, the more your brain keeps thinking like that. So the difference engine is really kind of a good pairing between my desire to leave an impact, a positive impact on the world, the way my brain thinks, which is like, let me solve a problem. Let me figure out a way to solve this problem.
I think that that's what actually, when you talk about that and you talk about the difference engine, which I really want to dive into because I think it's so incredible what you've built. But you mention and you talk about it as, division is designed and so is connection. And I think that what you're doing with the difference engine is you're bringing groups of people together that may never have run into each other, may never have understood. They would have received this problems or challenges from the media, from research, from looking at things from theoretical perspectives. And what you've done is created a lab where you take these young, aspiring change makers who want to make change happen in the world, but you're not having them do research papers necessarily. You're having them actually solve. And it's like truly ultimately like what you're talking about is like when you're constantly looking at these problems and everyone over here is having debates about it and discussing and opinions are flying, and you're like, what are you going to do about it? Do something. And I feel like that's what the difference engine is. It's like literally telling young individuals, you can do something. You don't have to think that you're not capable of doing something. So I'd love for you to go into like what really planted that seed for you that I want to build a difference engine. And then I'd love for you to share what that is.
Um, I think it's also the answer again. This might be a frustrating answer. Is also I think the way I'm wired. I really get frustrated just listening to people. I get frustrated listening to my own voice as well. And the older I get, the more frustrated I get with that. And, if you live in DC and work in DC like I did, you talk a lot about problems. Sometimes you write about problems. Sometimes you talk about what you wrote, which is a book talk. Sometimes you write about what you said, like I gave a speech and now I'm going to write about the speech that and it's just this like cycle of talking and writing and writing and talking. And meanwhile, the problem is still there. And I think writing and talking are pretty easy to do. They're low denominator effort exercises. Not that there's not an importance as a lawyer, I'd say that's very important to write and talk. But that's not what the country needs right now. I think right now what we need is people who are going to build. Who's building? If the medical system is broken, there's plenty of research out there. There's plenty of talk out there that tells you again and again that the system is broken for most Americans. The greatest source of bankruptcy, more Americans go bankrupt because they cannot afford medical care. People are going broke in this country trying to live, trying to survive. I don't need any more information. What I need to do now is to solve that problem. And to me, it gets really frustrating every time somebody keeps bringing up the problem. I can't listen to it. It just drives me up the wall. And so that's kind of where that desire comes from. I just want to be like, let's just build something. And then the other thing is that we live in a time where production of things has been democratized, right? You can
Yep.
3D print an object, you can make a podcast, you can make a video, you can code software using AI, you can craft a physical object. It's pretty easy. You can make a mold, it's all of that has been is pretty accessible compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago when it was very expensive and people wouldn't dream of doing it.
Right. Accessibility to entrepreneurship has become so
Yeah,
easy now.
right. So why don't we give the thesis behind the difference engine is why don't we give communities, why don't we treat them as entrepreneurs, communities that has a problem, but a church that has a problem, a city that has a problem. a group, a social group that has a problem, an ethnic group that has a problem, women, men, whatever. So that's what we do. And we work with young people quite a bit, like you mentioned, because we're at Arizona State. But we have one program kind of for each third of your life. So we have the Creative Justice Lab for young people. We have the Distinguished Innovation Fellows program for people that are in the latter stage of their life. They're at, near, or past retirement. And then we have a program for everybody in the middle, people like you and me. So we call that the Difference Core. We launched our first Difference Core class last year, or this year rather, and they finished their program in March and pitched their ideas in March. And so there's something for everybody. And then the beauty of it is that these cohorts work with each other. So the young people help out the old people, and the older people help out the middle-aged people, and it's all interconnected. So it's very beautiful in that way.
Well, I think right there, right? It's the fact that you're having now intergenerationals come together. They're learning from each other. There's experience that's being taught. The younger generation is seeing that I actually have something within my own hands that I can do. I'd love for you to like walk through, a group of students who actually pitched an idea. I know you do like a Shark Tank style concept where, they come in, for example, one year was food inequity, which I came and saw, and you have these different teams that come together to come up with a solution of how would you solve this for this particular community. And they go up, they pitch their ideas, and then they actually get $50,000 invest into their concept idea. And I remember while we were there was a girl from the year previously who had won, who was already in Series A, and she was not even a senior in college, or she had
Hmm.
just become a senior in
To a
college.
senior. Yeah.
She was a senior in college, and she was already in her partner, her co-founder wasn't there because she was pitching a Series A fund, in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah.
And so, I think that part right there is what I would love to kind of dive into a little bit more, because what you're doing is you're literally teaching these kids. And yes, there's older individuals that are there too, but you're teaching these like specific. And the reason I'm harping on the aspiring change makers on these kids is because, to your point, there wasn't accessibility in other ways before. Before it was like write your papers, be a part of a community organization, be a community builder. And it would have just put them into that same kind of pattern of looking at it. And now what you're doing is you're empowering them with actually seeing that change can happen within their own hands, and that it is possible to build something. So I'd love for you to like talk about an experience where you saw a student actually like their eyes just finally like it clicked for them, like, wow, like look what I can do, and how that shifted the trajectory of like their life choices.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of my
Mhm.
students or the students that work with us, but perhaps what I can share is like the results that indicate that. So we just had a wonderful young person who, one of our board members is Canon Corporation of America. And one of the ways they support the difference engine is they provide us with a student who does kind of the calm social media work, and they're also involved in the projects. And she was only with us for a short period of time, but she, got very emotional because she got another job, full-time job, and wrote very nice emails. And that's really nice to see. One of our original students, we've been around 5 years. She was a master's student. She became a PhD student with us, master's PhD. And now she's graduated. She has a full-time job. She has a beautiful child, and she's still volunteering with us. The first ever
Oh,
student that started working with us. Another student who started with us 3 years ago stayed with us for all 3 years, and now we've hired her as a full-time employee. So her first job ever out of college is to stay there, is to work with us. And so I think that speaks more in terms of the volume of in terms of how the students feel about working with us. And in terms of some of the ideas that you asked about, I mean, this March, a couple of weeks ago, we had our Creative Justice Lab for this year. And the grand challenge we gave the students was to build practical solutions to help immigrant communities
mhm.
because of what immigrant communities are going through right now with the Trump administration. People are dying on the streets of American cities. And so, can we build a product? An example of that, this is not one that we worked on particularly, but is in Long Beach called Whistlemania, which I thought was really cool. So, the idea behind that is that ICE comes to places like Home Depots to interdict and arrest and apprehend people. So now people know that, so they'll send observers, organizations will send people with phone cameras. So ICE is like, okay, now we'll just go to random places. So what if you had a whistle that makes a unique sound? You can 3D print that whistle. It makes a really unique sound. And people within a 200 feet radius can hear and know, oh my God, ICE is here. I better get out. Because The difference between a whistle and a phone is if I don't know Dr. Berry, can't text her, right? But she
Mhm.
may be here passively, an undocumented person. But my job as a citizen is to let her know you need to leave because ICE is here. I'm not going to call her because I don't know her, but she can hear a very sharp, like unique whistle sound. So you hear them in this area as you're driving around, and it's a multi-directional tool that accomplishes a social good purpose built by and for
Wow.
the community. And so that's one idea. Another idea, one of the earliest ideas we had was a creative justice lab. We didn't even call it a creative justice lab back then. We just had a hackathon on transportation, and the winning idea was an app we built called Ride Centric that our students built. And the mandate was like make transportation more accessible, mass transit in particular, but make it more accessible. It's a big problem in LA. So they came up with a very simple idea that I think is very innovative, but it's super simple and like a lot of innovative ideas. And they came up with this app that would track, you would give it permission, it would track you when you're moving. So if you're in a car or if you're in a public transit system, it knows. If you take a car to work, nothing happens. If you take the train to work, the moment you get out of the transit system, pop up in like a quarter-mile radius discounts, like pretty awesome discounts for all the businesses there, but only if you took the train, right?
Oh, wow, that's
And
really cool.
so, yeah, and there were pretty significant discounts that were negotiated. So you only if you took the train. And so it's great for the business because they're still getting something out of it because otherwise there would have been no foot traffic. So it's better than zero. So yeah, it's discounted, but you're making some revenue, right? It's great for the environment because it's encouraging more people to take the train. It's great for people because they're spending less money on transportation and maintaining their cars. It's great for the city because it encourages transportation to be used that they've invested in. And it's tying a community good, a social good, anything commons related to, and you can't do that with litigation. You can't do that with protest. You can't do that with writing a book. You can't do that with a speech, but you can do it with an app. Something only a product can accomplish. So that's the kind of work that we do, and we launched 20 products this past March. This was our largest year with our largest number of community entrepreneurs. So we're very proud of the work that our teams are doing. We have 77 now different engineers that
That's
work with us, and we're
incredible.
growing every single day.
Wow, you
Yeah.
should be really proud of yourself, Essen. I know it's been what,
It's a
6
team
years?
effort. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
5 years.
definitely.
Yeah.
5 years of you building this, and, what I'm hearing in all of this as well is that not only are you making a difference for the community and for the businesses, but it's like because these kids or these individuals are building out these apps and these products that are helping and benefiting everyone, I can only imagine how much then the community actually wants to lean in to being a part of the difference engine because they see that how this is going to benefit, like, my neighborhood, how this is gonna benefit.
Yeah.
And so how much of that are you noticing as well with your corporate partnerships, your sponsors, and everyone who's coming in and looking at this as to your point, it's that you're not asking to do another research that's just going to, write out statistics about what's happening, but how are corporate partners also looking at this as, wow, you just built something that we could even benefit from to be able to service our clients?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. One of the tools that we have is called the Women's Power and Influence Index. That's a tool we built in house. And it was a way to test our model. It's still a tool that we have that we launched we don't call it version 2.0 anymore. I've been told to not call it that. We launched the WPI 2026. And a couple of weeks ago, it measures 121 companies. It's the most comprehensive measure of gender fairness in the country. And the interesting thing is, it tells you a lot about your workplace that even you may not know as a company leader. And so we've had conversations with instance with PayPal, and they've changed their policies on the basis of that.
Wow.
We've had conversations with Netflix. Just sent the index to the leadership at Starbucks because Starbucks went up in their kind of the power that women enjoy at that workplace, and they're doing really really well. And it's good news for them. B, we serve as a consultative entity for some of these partners, and that's a revenue generation piece for us, right? Because our students become consultants. And C, it's like you're seeing change because another thing that a tool can do is that it can keep data, right? And so that's live and actively updated. So you can't change what you can't measure,
Mhm.
right? So, well, I guess you can change it, but it's not it's not going to be an accurate way of changing it. So that's kind of the philosophy behind the index. And we try not to make it punitive towards these companies, but we've seen remarkable uptake of our index with Fortune 500 companies. And we've had conversations with Blackstone. There's a number of companies we've shared our results with, some of whom have actually shifted policies on the basis of the index. And the more it gets out there, the more companies are using it. We have 16 young women who designed this index. They're
That's
brilliant,
that's so
super
incredible.
smart.
Like, I want to take a moment right here. The fact that you said that there's companies, like you said, mentioned PayPal that has changed their policies. Like, walk me through that. What does that mean? Like, you ran this data, you extracted these numbers, and then you went to them and said, like, hey, we ran this research. This is what we
Yeah.
see specifically about your organization. How do you
Hmm.
really get them to listen and get their attention, especially in a time right now where things like DEI are so under attack, and giving any kind of attention towards those things could also bring attention to the unwanted attention to their organization that they don't want to engage in.
Yeah. So, like I said, we're not punitive. And so we don't say that you're doing terribly. We just say, here's how you could do things better, right?
Right.
We assume good intentions, of the people that work at these companies. And that's usually the way it is. We have never used, and I don't personally prefer this word, I've never used it in any of my language, my writing, my materials, or the difference engine, the word DEI.
Mhm.
So what we talk about is fairness. Everybody can understand fairness, and fairness is just equity. That's really what it is. But we talk about it in a way that doesn't make people kind of
Squirmy.
raise their hackles or get defensive. Yeah, because there's a other side to fairness, which is unfairness. What you may think is fair is what somebody else may think is unfair. But inherently, we have a compass that tells us, my 7-year-old nephew understands what fairness is and what's unfair and what's fair, right? Your nieces understand what's fair and unfair. So that's the language that we build things around. And the fact that we're practically focused kind of sets us up to have conversations it just makes it easy to open doors. So for instance, if I'm practically focused and I'm building this index, my language is not, can you believe how terrible you are in terms of how unfairly you treat people, which may be the case, right? But instead, like, do you know how much money you could make if you actually had a diverse workplace?
They're
Like,
definitely going to pay attention to that.
yeah, and it's true, like, diverse workplaces are way more profitable. And you're talking about investing $1 billion in a factory, or you could invest $10 million in building a fair workplace, and the gains you would get are tremendous. Let me show you how, and let us help you how to do that, right? And it also helps that we're just an academic institution. We don't really have a bone in this fight, or we're incubated by an academic institution. So I'm not here to pick one company over another. I could care less. I'm just here to build a fair workplace. And so all of that kind of conspires together to lower the potential defensiveness. And to be honest with you, we found people are very willing to hear and listen, even if they're not doing super well, because they all want to do better. We run on optimism. We're a very optimistic group, and that's just my philosophy, and I think it's just a philosophy of the people that we bring onto the team.
But I think that that's really powerful, because when you think about optimism, you talk about improvements, you talk about the strengths that you have. That's where you're also not creating the stunt that you're going to have in your brain, right? So your amygdala, all of those, this is where my nerdiness comes out, but it's like that prefrontal cortex of, when you start with fear, when you create that defensiveness, then automatically any of those decision making processes just completely shuts down. So I
Yeah,
think what you're saying again, and what I think is brilliant, is the fact that you're approaching this from a place of like, hey, we want everyone to do good. We want everyone to win in this. There's not like a you lost, we won. Like, it's like you win, we win, like our society wins. And
right.
so we recognize that what you care about is, how is this going to help your business bottom line succeed? And what we care about is, how do we create a more fair workplace? And so by being able to look at those and be like, what's that common denominator here? And it's like, we're providing you to that. And that's brilliant, because you're now meeting them. You're not creating this idea of, we're going to punish you, we're going to shame you for who you are, your identity of what your work is doing. And I think that that's where a lot of people in that conversation who stay in the, let me just have a conversation about my talk, about my book, about my article, and let's now compare about how you feel about it versus how I feel about it. That's where they get stuck and they just stay there. But what you're doing, and I think what's so brilliant again, is that you're showing that it doesn't matter generationally where you are. change can continuously happen if we just like come and meet and look at that, what that means and what that looks like for all of us.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, what would you say then that, like, when you think about the difference engine and where it's going and the vision that you have for this, and what I'm sure from, day one to day like 5 years down, it's evolved a lot, obviously. But more so than necessarily your vision of it, because I know what matters to you is how everyone else around you is taking it. And you want to kind of be in the just observing and seeing it grow like a proud father. But when you're seeing these students who 5 years down the track are still staying involved, who are building things that are actually getting investors involved, and how are you seeing them taking the difference engine and expanding on, what is possible for their journey as a change maker in their trajectory of their life?
Yeah, it's actually quite phenomenal to see. I mean, we're still pretty young as an organization, but I mentioned one of the students. I'm not going to mention her by name because I don't know if she wants to be embarrassed, but she's brilliant. And she's probably listening to this when this is airing. But in the beginning, I used to run the Women's Power and Influence Index alongside another professor, Dr. S. Miguel, and she and I ran this together, and she's still involved. But over time, we had one student come in who kind of took it over a little bit, and then this other student came in, and she runs it. I don't run it. I just show up. She sets the agenda. She sets the meetings. She runs the meetings. She figures out what's priority, what companies are going to be ranked, how are they going to be ranked, what she's going to say about them. She assigns the other students work. And she's a student on par with them. Same situation. What companies are we going to talk with? She presented in March. She came up with the deck. She had this detailed presentation. She put the presentation together. We just reached out to Starbucks. She created the document to send to Starbucks' head of talent, their head of HR. She's going to be when we do a call, and I'll send you a link to a highlight reel of the call we had with PayPal if you want to put it in your show notes. But
Absolutely.
she'll be leading that call. And so what's happening there is that what she is prioritizing, or the way she's starting to think about the index, is what the index is becoming, which is great because the index shouldn't be what I care about. It was as an idea I had, but if it's all my ideas, we ain't going anywhere. We're just it's a very slow growth situation. And so we serve community, but we model how we serve community by building our own internal community, and uplifting our team and our students and giving them agency. President Obama used to say, like, the only thing he looks for um, in a kind of somebody when he's hiring them is like if their attitude is like, "Don't worry it, I'm going to solve it," or "Don't worry it, I'll handle it," which is kind of
Mm,
what we hire for. We hire for two things: kindness, number one, and competence, number two. Right? Kindness, I can't teach you, either kind or you're not.
mhm.
Competence, I can try to get you a little bit better. And so that's who we hire for. And when you hire people that are kind and competent and let them go, they'll amaze you with what they're going to build. I mean, there's no way I could have built the index. There's no way I could have done what she's done with the index because A, I'm not a woman, so there's things I just don't know.
That's true.
B, nobody's perfect.
Yep.
C, I just, she's bringing kind of new information into it, and I still collaborate with her, and I guide her and everything, but it's really becoming her project. And she comes up with ideas. I'm going to talk about this here. I'm going to recruit these students. This is what we're going to build. She just built a beautiful, I'll go off on a little tangent here. One of the problems with the index was that some of the data was not visible. So they decided they're going to call out the companies that don't share. She just sent me a message that don't share their data with the EEOC, with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they've built this amazing dashboard that calls out. So it's not just the fact that you're ranked on the index, but there's another dashboard they built that says, hey, we couldn't rank you on the index because you don't even share your information. What are you trying to hide? Why not share it?
Mm.
Looks like you're doing pretty well, right? And then they've given that an internal ranking. It's great. And we want companies to be transparent because that's the first pathway. Again, if you're not transparent, I can't measure you. If you can't measure you, you can't be profitable. Don't you want
Right.
to be profitable? Costs you nothing to be transparent. You're probably doing better than you think you are, right? And so we wouldn't have been able to build that if we didn't have students like her running. And now she's going to be an employee running our index.
That's phenomenal. As in this entire conversation, I think the most powerful thing and the most beautiful thing that's woven into all of this is not just about the fact of like, how are we solving problems and actually doing something about it? And the second part of, this is truly a form of education, but applied education, which I think is now being valued significantly more than traditional education. But the third piece that I think is woven in so beautifully is something that, I know, Obama has been pressing and talking about a lot more is passing down the baton and being okay with the fact that I have yielded a lot of power. I have yielded a lot of things that I've done in my time, in my generation. But it is really important if we want to see this society thrive that we need to pass the baton. And I feel like what you've designed with the difference engine, regardless if it's the students, if it's the middle-aged folks, like yourself, I'm not there yet, but just kidding. But the middle-aged group and then the older generation is that there is this sense of like each one of you are adding value, each one of you matter, and it's okay to recognize where it stops with me and where it needs to go on with you. And that seems to be what is really the culmination of being able to create such change is that you're not hoarding all of this power and this control and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create this. And that is what's allowing all of these like, scalable products, projects to actually like evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, sometimes every entrepreneur struggles with letting go, and I am a human being just like everybody else, so I also struggle with letting go, but it's kind of hard not to let go when the people you're working with are so amazing, right? When you're like, there's not even a way I could have done this better. I mean, I have another staff person, she's probably listening to this too when this is airing, one of the best hires I've ever made in my life. And she reads my mind better than I read my mind. And so why struggle? Why not just let her do it? Because she's so good at what she does, right? And so when somebody's that phenomenal, you want them to have the same feeling as an entrepreneur that you had. You want them to feel like, oh man, I launched this thing and it's taken off. And you want them to become an entrepreneur. You want them to own it. You want them to run with it. You want them to make it their baby. And then you want them to do the same thing with other young people. That's how you build a phenomenal organization, right? And your goal as a leader is not to control and build the actual products. It's really two things. One is to set the vision and repeat that vision, verify that vision. Well, maybe three things. Two is to find the resources to execute on that vision. And then three is to hire the right people to execute on that vision. That's it. It's actually quite an easy job if you just limit
Mhm.
it to those three things. And I think leaders make it harder on themselves because they're like, oh my God, I have to check the logo design and build this product out, and I have to make sure that it works this way, and da 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 da. It's all good, you know? So those are the three things I try to focus on when I'm running the organization. I'm not always successful, but I try.
Essen, thank you so much for sharing about just this incredible work that you're doing with the difference engine and the change that you're helping to create, the problems that you're helping to solve by empowering everyone around you to see that they have the resources through what you're built, but also they have the empowerment to do so. Last question for you is that looking back now at what you've created with Difference Engine, looking back at what with the passion that you were working with when you were in DC, doing everything you were doing, looking at this entire trajectory of what you've done, how would you say that the difference engine has reframed your perspective on the power of change versus what you were able to do within a more traditional institution?
I think I have a kind of an internal theory of change, which is pretty simple, right? So there's change that's broad, and there's change that's narrow, and then there's change that's deep, and there's change that's shallow, right? So my work, I used to started a legal aid clinic at one point, and we were helping one client at a time, but really meaningfully. So that's narrow, but really deep. But that doesn't change a system. You're just working within the system. And then when I was working in the government, the change I was doing was very broad, but really, really shallow, right? Like creating one little policy that probably nobody has any idea that it got changed because it's just a tiny little thing that got changed somewhere. If we added a language to the booklet that somebody who's in ICE detention now has if they're, limited English proficient in some language. Great feeling to do it multiple times, but also not changing a system. And the only ways I've found to meaningfully shift systems is through two ways. One is through entrepreneurship, it's taking risks, making change happen. The iPhone is a phenomenal systems changer. only happen through entrepreneurship, or getting a mandate of some kind. So
Mm.
somebody says to you, hey, you're now in power, you're the CEO, you're the president, you're the governor, and she has the ability to make that change happen. That's a mandate. And the only way I've found to be entrepreneurial mandate is you have to do change that's both broad and deep. And
Mhm.
for me, my hope is that the difference engine is the start of something like that, that we change the way that communities think about solving problems, that when there is no clean drinking water in Flint, Michigan, they're not just thinking, let me litigate, let me protest, let me lobby, let me write an op-ed, all fine. But that they also think, could I 3D print a water filtration device and just plug it into my house and get clean drinking water? What would that look like? We know what it would look like, but what would that look like, right? And does that just short circuit all those problems and give me agency? And then if I do it as a community group, could I actually sell that and make some revenue off of it, make it a sustainable community driven business? What would that look like? Right. So we want communities to have that in their toolkit. And that's when you actually start to change systems.
Love it. I think that's amazing. Again, it's agency to the entrepreneur, it's agency to the community member, it's agency to the individual. And to wrap it up to what we said in the beginning is that entrepreneurship right now is so accessible and democratized in a way that wasn't a decade ago, wasn't even 5 years ago. And so take advantage of that, lean in and see what you can do. I'm going to obviously have all the links in the podcast for everyone to see. If you're in the LA area, you absolutely need to go to one of the labs, the Shark Tanks. It's brilliant. It's incredible what these people come up with. You leave so deeply inspired and it's incredible. So thank you so much, Essen, for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hi, friends. I have a favor to ask you. If you're finding meaning and you're really resonating with these episodes, I'd love if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your friends and family. Your words help others discover the stories and perspectives that we're exploring over here. And the more that we grow and the more feedback that we get from you through these reviews, the more we can make sure to create meaningful episodes that you're going to enjoy. You have no idea how much it means to me and how much it means to creating these podcast episodes for you. And I'd appreciate it so much. So subscribe, follow, leave a review, and share it with your family and friends. Thank you so much.